Don't scream. Just keep walking, she whispered to herself, even as her footsteps echoed too loudly against the empty sidewalk. The night had that strange, hollow stillness, like the city had exhaled and forgotten to breathe again. A flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows that stretched and shrank with every step Lily Harper took, her fingers tightening around the strap of her worn canvas bag. It was just past 11:40 p.m., the air cool enough to bite through her thin jacket, and the block ahead looked darker than she remembered, quieter than it should have been. She told herself it was nothing. Just another late shift, another long walk home, another night pretending everything was under control. But then she heard it. Footsteps that didn't match her own. Slower. Heavier. Too close. Her heart stuttered. She kept walking, faster now, her sneakers scraping lightly against the pavement, keys sliding between her fingers the way her roommate once showed her, just in case. Don't turn around. Don't make it obvious. Just get to the main street, she thought, eyes fixed on the faint glow of a traffic light 2 blocks ahead. The sound followed. Not rushing, not calling out, just there, steady, intentional. A chill crawled up her spine. She crossed the street abruptly, hoping it was coincidence, hoping she was overthinking, but the footsteps crossed too. That's when the fear stopped being quiet. Her breathing grew shallow, uneven, her pulse loud in her ears. Okay, she murmured under her breath, trying to stay calm, trying not to run. Running made it real. Running made it a chase. But then a hand reached, too close, too sudden. An instinct took over. She stumbled back, her bag slipping from her shoulder, her voice catching in her throat before it could become a scream. And just as the moment tipped into something she couldn't control, another presence cut through the tension like a sharp line drawn across chaos. A man stepped in, not loudly, not dramatically, just there, solid, unshaken. His voice was low, controlled, the kind that didn't need to rise to be heard. That's enough. The world seemed to pause. The tension shifted, redirected, and in that fragile second, Lily found herself frozen, her breath caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. The stranger didn't look at her at first. His focus was forward, calm but unmistakably firm, like he had already decided how this would end. There was no rush in his movements, no wasted motion, just quiet authority that made everything else feel smaller. The air changed. The threat faded as quickly as it had appeared, dissolving into the shadows it came from, leaving behind nothing but the sound of Lily's uneven breathing and the distant hum of traffic returning to life. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She stood there, hands trembling, trying to process what had just happened, while he finally turned toward her. His eyes were sharp, observant, but not unkind. "Are you hurt?" he asked, simple, direct. She shook her head, though her voice didn't follow. I don't think so." He studied her for half a second longer, as if confirming it himself, then shrugged off his coat without hesitation and held it out to her. "You're shaking." She hadn't realized how cold she felt until then. The fabric was warm, heavier than it looked, carrying a faint scent of clean linen and something subtle she couldn't place. She hesitated, her fingers hovering before taking it, the reality of the moment finally settling in. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. He gave a small nod, like it was nothing, like stepping into someone else's worst moment was just part of his routine. But it wasn't. And something about him didn't fit. His posture, the precision in the way he moved, the quiet control in his voice, it all felt intentional. Not random, not accidental. As if he hadn't just been passing by. As if he had already been watching. Lily pulled the coat tighter around herself, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. And when she finally looked up again, really looked at him this time, she realized something that made her pulse spike all over again. This man, whoever he was, didn't look like he belonged on a dark, empty street at midnight. And yet, he had appeared exactly when she needed him most. The silence that followed felt louder than anything that had come before, like the city itself was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Lily pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders, the warmth slowly replacing the cold that had settled deep in her bones. But her hands still trembled, her fingers gripping the fabric as if letting go would make everything real again. I live a few blocks that way," she said finally, her voice steadier than she felt. nodding toward the faint glow of a busier street. The man glanced in that direction, then back at her, his expression unreadable for a brief moment before he gave a small, decisive nod. "I will walk with you," he said, not as a question, but as a quiet conclusion. She hesitated, not out of fear of him, but because something about the situation felt too unusual, too perfectly timed. "You do not have to," she replied softly, though she did not move. He slipped his hands into his pockets, his posture relaxed but alert, like he was always aware of everything around him. "I know," he answered, his tone calm, almost detached. "But I will." There was something in the way he said it that made arguing feel unnecessary, even pointless, so she simply nodded and started walking, her pace slower now, more measured, as if her body was still catching up with what had just happened. For a while, they walked in silence, their footsteps sinking unintentionally against the pavement, the distant sound of passing cars growing louder as they neared the main road. Lily stole a glance at him, really studying him this time. He looked composed, almost too composed, his movements precise, his gaze occasionally scanning the street ahead and behind them in a way that did not feel casual. "Do you do this often?" she asked before she could stop herself. He looked at her briefly, one eyebrow lifting slightly. "Walk people home?" he asked. She gave a small, nervous laugh. "Show up out of nowhere and help strangers." His lips curved just enough to suggest a smile, but it did not quite reach his eyes. "No," he said simply. "Not often." That answer lingered between them, heavier than it should have been. They reached the corner where the dim, empty street opened into a brighter intersection. The hum of traffic lights and late-night diners filling the air again, grounding her in something familiar. Lily slowed to a stop, turning toward him, the weight of the moment settling in her chest. "This is me," she said, gesturing toward the apartment building across the street, its flickering hallway light visible through the glass door. "Thank you for earlier. I do not know what would have." Her voice trailed off, the thought unfinished, unspoken. He shook his head slightly, cutting the sentence before it could form. "You are safe," he said, as if that was the only part that mattered. She nodded, swallowing the rest of her words, then slipped her hand into the pocket of the coat, instinctively searching for something to ground herself, and that was when her fingers brushed against something unfamiliar. She frowned slightly and pulled it out, her breath catching as she looked down at a small, sleek card, matte black with a single line of silver text catching the streetlight. She had not noticed it before. For a second, she just stared at it, her mind trying to process why something so simple felt so significant. Slowly, she looked back up at him, her eyes searching his face. "You dropped this," she said, holding it out. He glanced at the card, then back at her, and for the first time, there was the faintest shift in his expression, something almost like hesitation or calculation. "Keep it," he said after a brief pause, his voice quieter now, more deliberate. "In case you need anything." The words sounded simple, but they carried a weight she could not quite explain. "I do not even know your name," she said, her curiosity finally breaking through the lingering shock. He held her gaze for a moment longer, as if deciding something she was not aware of, then gave a slight nod, almost to himself. "Noah," he said. Just that. No last name, no explanation. And before she could ask anything else, he stepped back, already creating distance, already becoming part of the night again. Lily stood there, the card still in her hand, his coat wrapped around her shoulders, watching as he turned and walked away without looking back. And somehow, even with the lights of the city around her, she felt the same strange realization settle deep in her chest again. This had not felt like a coincidence at all. The next morning did not feel like a new beginning. It felt like a continuation of something unfinished, something that had followed her home and settled quietly into the corners of her mind. Lily sat at the edge of her narrow bed, the city already awake beyond her window, sunlight slipping through the blinds in thin golden lines, but she barely noticed it. Her attention was fixed on the object in her hand, the black card resting against her fingers like it carried more weight than it should. She had not slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the moment again, the sudden shift in the air, the way he had appeared, the way everything had changed without warning. Noah. Just Noah. No last name, no explanation, just a presence that felt too precise to be accidental. She turned the card over again, her thumb tracing the smooth surface until it caught the faint silver lettering. This time, she read it slowly, carefully, as if the words might rearrange themselves if she blinked. Carter Holdings. The name meant nothing to her at first, just another company in a city full of them, until her phone buzzed beside her, a notification lighting up the screen. She reached for it absent-mindedly, her eyes still on the card, and tapped the alert open. Breaking news. Major acquisition announced by Carter Holdings CEO Noah Carter. Her breath caught, her gaze snapping to the phone as the headline expanded, a photo loading beneath it. And there he was. The same man. The same calm expression. The same eyes that had studied her under a flickering streetlight just hours ago. Only now he was standing in front of a wall of cameras, dressed in a tailored suit, his posture sharp, controlled, unmistakably powerful. Lily blinked. Once, twice, her mind struggling to reconcile the image in her hand with the memory still fresh in her chest. That is not possible, she whispered, though the evidence was right there in front of her. She looked back down at the card, then at the screen again, her pulse beginning to race, not from fear this time, but from something else, something deeper and far more unsettling. He had not just helped her. He had chosen to step into her world. And suddenly, every small detail from the night before shifted under a different light. The way he had moved, the way he had watched, the way he had already seemed to know what to do before anything happened. It had not felt like chance. It had felt like intention. Lily stood abruptly, pacing the small space of her apartment, the card still clutched in her hand as her thoughts spiraled faster than she could organize them. Why would someone like him be there? Why would someone like him even notice her? She stopped in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her in yesterday's clothes, his coat still draped over her shoulders, oversized and out of place against everything else she owned. The contrast was almost absurd. Alleyways and billionaires did not exist in the same story. And yet, here she was, standing exactly in the middle of both. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her attention back. Another notification, another image of him, another confirmation that this was real. Lily swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the card as a new thought surfaced, quieter but sharper than the rest. If he was willing to reveal this much without saying it out loud, then what had he chosen not to reveal? The question lingered, heavy and unresolved, as she glanced once more at his name printed in silver, the weight of it settling deeper into her chest. And for the first time since the night before, she realized something that made her hesitate. This was not the end of what had happened. It was only the beginning. By noon, the city felt louder than usual, as if everything around Lily had sped up while she stood still trying to catch up. The subway roared beneath her feet as she climbed the steps to the street, the black card tucked carefully inside her bag. Yet somehow it felt like it was pressing against her thoughts with every step she took. She had replayed the moment 100 times already, the way he had said his name, the way he had walked away without looking back, and now the image from the news refused to leave her mind. Noah Carter, billionaire, CEO, a man who stood in rooms she had never even seen, making decisions that moved millions of dollars like it was nothing. And yet, just hours ago, he had been standing in the same cold air she had, offering her his coat like it did not matter who he was. That disconnect would not settle. It only grew louder. Lily stopped in front of a glass building, its surface reflecting the skyline above, tall and polished, so different from the cracked sidewalks she was used to walking on. Carter Holdings. The name stretched across the entrance in clean silver letters, identical to the ones on the card she had found in his coat. She had not planned to come here. At least that was what she told herself. But her feet had brought her anyway, pulled by a question she could not ignore anymore. She stood there for a moment, watching people move in and out of the building, employees in tailored suits, conversations clipped and efficient, everything about the place running on a rhythm she did not belong to. Her reflection in the glass made that painfully clear. His coat was still on her shoulders, oversized, out of place, like a piece of a different life that had been dropped into hers by accident. Or maybe not by accident at all. She took a slow breath and stepped inside. The lobby was bright, quiet, almost too perfect, the kind of place where even footsteps sounded softer. A receptionist looked up immediately, her expression polite but practiced. "Can I help you?" she asked. Lily hesitated for half a second, her fingers brushing against the card in her bag. grounding herself before she spoke. "I am here to return something," she said, her voice steady but quieter than she intended. The receptionist's eyes flickered briefly to the coat, then back to Lily, her smile tightening just slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" Lily shook her head. "No, I met him last night." The words sounded strange even to her, like she was trying to explain something that did not belong in this space. The receptionist's expression did not change, but there was a subtle shift, something more attentive now. "Mr. Carter has a full schedule today," she replied smoothly. "You can leave whatever it is with me." Lily glanced down at the coat, then back at the elevator behind the desk, a quiet determination building in her chest. This was not just about returning something. This was about understanding why someone like him had stepped into her life at all. She reached into her bag, pulling out the black card and placing it gently on the counter. The moment it touched the surface, everything changed. The receptionist's posture straightened almost instantly, her eyes widening just enough to betray recognition before she quickly masked it. She looked from the card to Lily again, this time with a completely different kind of attention. "Please, give me a moment," she said, her tone no longer routine. She picked up the phone, her voice lowered as she spoke quietly into the receiver, her gaze never fully leaving Lily. Seconds stretched longer than they should have, the quiet of the lobby suddenly heavier, more aware. Lily stood there, her heart beating faster again, not from fear, but from the realization that she had just stepped into something far bigger than she had expected. And somewhere above her, behind layers of glass and steel, there was a man who had chosen to walk into her world, and now, without saying a word, he was pulling her into his. The wait did not last long, but it felt like time had slowed down just enough for every small detail to sharpen. Lily stood in the center of the lobby, aware of every passing glance, every quiet step echoing across the polished floor, every second stretching longer than it should. The receptionist hung up the phone and looked at her again, this time with a level of attention that made it clear something had shifted beyond a simple request. "He will see you," she said, her tone respectful now, almost careful. Lily blinked, caught off guard by how quickly everything had changed. "Now?" she asked, before she could stop herself. The receptionist gave a small nod. "Now." A security badge was placed on the counter, and a man in a dark suit appeared at her side, as if he had been there all along. "This way," he said, his voice calm but direct. Lily hesitated for only a moment before following, her steps quieter now, more deliberate, as if she had crossed an invisible line she could not step back from. The elevator ride was silent, the numbers climbing steadily, each floor pulling her further away from the world she understood and closer to something she did not. She caught her reflection in the mirrored wall again, his coat still draped over her shoulders, and for a second, she wondered if she should have taken it off, if she should have tried to fit in more. But something told her that would not have mattered. When the doors opened, the air itself felt different, quieter, controlled. The hallway was lined with glass walls and muted colors, the kind of place where everything had a purpose, even the silence. The man guiding her stopped at a set of doors and gave a small nod before stepping back. "You can go in." Lily's hand hovered for a second before she pushed the door open. The office was larger than she expected, but it was not the size that made her pause. It was him. Noah stood near the window, the city stretched out behind him, sunlight cutting through the glass and framing him in a way that made everything else feel distant. He was dressed exactly like the man she had seen in the photo that morning, sharp, precise, every detail controlled. But when he turned toward her, there was something familiar in his eyes, something that did not belong to this room. "You came," he said, his voice calm, as if this had been expected. Lily stepped inside slowly, the door closing behind her with a quiet click that felt louder than it should. "You gave me a reason to," she replied, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of his coat. For a moment, neither of them moved, the space between them filled with everything that had not been said yet. She took a breath, steadying herself, and stepped closer, holding the coat out toward him. "I wanted to return this," she said, her voice more composed now. He glanced at the coat, but he did not take it. Instead, his gaze returned to her, studying her in a way that felt more intentional than before. "Keep it," he said quietly. "It suits you better than it does me." The words caught her off guard, not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said it, like giving something away was nothing to him. Lily frowned slightly, lowering the coat just a bit. "That is not why I am here," she said, her tone firmer now, the questions she had been holding finally pushing forward. "You could have told me who you were." A flicker of something passed through his expression, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "Would it have changed what happened?" he asked. The question landed heavier than she expected. Lily hesitated, searching for an answer, but nothing came immediately. Because the truth was, it would not have changed the moment itself. But it changed everything after. "No," she admitted softly. "But it changes why." That was when the silence between them shifted again, deeper this time, more honest. Noah stepped closer, just enough to close some of the distance, his presence filling the space in a way that was impossible to ignore. "Then maybe," he said, his voice lower now, more deliberate, "you should ask the right question." Lily's heart picked up, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was implying. She met his gaze, holding it this time, no longer unsure. "Why were you there?" she asked. And for the first time since she had walked into the room, Noah did not answer immediately. The question did not hang in the air for long, but the pause that followed felt deliberate, like Noah was choosing not just what to say, but how much to reveal. He turned slightly, glancing out at the city below before looking back at her, his expression quieter now, less guarded than before. "Because you were not supposed to be there," he said finally. The answer landed in a way Lily did not expect, not dramatic, not shocking, but unsettling in its simplicity. She frowned, confusion pulling her brows together. "That does not make any sense," she replied, her voice tightening slightly. "I walk that street every night." Noah nodded once, as if he had already considered that. "I know," he said. That single sentence shifted something again, subtle but undeniable. Lily stilled, her breath catching just enough to make her aware of it. "What do you mean you know?" she asked, her tone sharper. Now, no longer just curious but searching. Noah took a step closer, not invading her space, but closing the distance enough that his presence felt more real, more grounded. "There have been reports," he said, measured and calm. "Patterns. Situations that repeat in places people stop paying attention to." He did not elaborate, but he did not need to. The implication was there. He had been watching. Not her specifically, maybe, but the area. The street. The risk. Lily shook her head slightly, trying to piece it together. "So you were just what? Walking around the city at midnight looking for problems?" she asked, disbelief threading through her words. For the first time, something close to a real expression crossed his face, not quite a smile, but not as distant as before. "Something like that," he said. "Except I do not look for problems. I look for patterns before they become ones." Lily let out a small breath, part frustration, part something else she could not name. "You talk like this is normal," she said quietly. "It is not." Noah held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "For you, no," he replied. "For me, it has to be." The honesty in that statement caught her off guard more than anything else he had said. It was not defensive, not arrogant, just factual. Like this was the life he had chosen, or maybe the one he had been forced into. Lily looked down for a moment, her fingers brushing the edge of his coat again, grounding herself in something physical. "You could have just called the police," she said, softer now, not accusing, but trying to understand. Noah's expression shifted again, something quieter settling behind his eyes. "And wait," he asked, "or step in?" The question was simple, but it carried weight. Lily did not answer right away, because she already knew what she would have wanted in that moment. Someone to step in, someone who did not hesitate. She looked back up at him, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. "You did not have to," she said. Noah shook his head once, his voice lower now, more personal than before. "No," he agreed. "I chose to." That word lingered between them. Chose. Not obligation. Not responsibility. A decision. And suddenly, the moment from the night before shifted again, no longer just something that had happened to her, but something he had actively stepped into. Lily exhaled slowly, her thoughts finally settling into something clearer, though not simpler. "You realize how strange this is, right?" she said, a faint, almost nervous smile touching her lips. A billionaire CEO walking into situations like that. Noah's gaze softened just slightly, though his posture remained composed. "You realize how strange it is that you are here asking me about it," he replied. That made her pause, the truth of it catching her off guard again. She was here, in his office, in his world, because she needed answers, because something about him did not make sense, and yet somehow, it did. Lily let out a quiet breath, her grip on the moment loosening just enough to let something else in. Curiosity, and maybe, something deeper beginning to take shape beneath it. The curiosity did not fade when she left his office. It followed her, quiet but persistent, like a question that refused to be ignored. Lily stepped back into the noise of the city, the elevator ride down feeling shorter than it should have, her mind still replaying every word, every pause, every look he had given her. It was not just what he said, it was what he did not say, the spaces in between that felt more intentional than anything else. By the time she reached the sidewalk, the world around her had returned to its usual rhythm, taxis passing, people moving with purpose, conversations blending into the background. But for her, something had shifted. She was no longer just part of that flow. She was aware of it in a different way, noticing details she would have ignored before, the same way he seemed to notice everything. Her hand instinctively tightened around the strap of her bag as she started walking, her eyes scanning the street ahead without meaning to. It was subtle, almost unconscious, but it was there. The awareness he carried had stayed with her. The next few days passed in a strange balance between normal and something else she could not define. Lily returned to her routine, long hours at the cafe, quiet evenings. In her small apartment, sketching whenever she could, trying to ground herself in the parts of her life that made sense. But Noah's presence lingered in unexpected ways. The coat still hung by her door, untouched, like a reminder she was not ready to let go of. The black card remained in her bag, though she found herself checking for it more often than she needed to. And sometimes, when the city grew quieter late at night, she would catch herself wondering if he was out there again, moving through the same streets with that same quiet intention. She told herself it did not matter. Their worlds were not meant to intersect again. That was how these things worked. Moments like that happened, and then they ended. But the thought did not settle the way it should have. One evening, as she was closing the cafe, wiping down the last table while the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, the door chimed unexpectedly. She looked up, surprised, her heart skipping for a reason she could not explain before she even saw who it was. But it was not him. It was a man in a tailored suit, standing just inside the doorway, scanning the room briefly before his eyes settled on her. "Lily Harper?" he asked, his tone polite but direct. She straightened slightly, confusion flickering across her face. "Yes," she replied cautiously. He stepped forward, reaching into his jacket and pulling out a small envelope, holding it out to her. "This was left for you," he said. "From Mr. Carter." Her breath caught, subtle but undeniable, as she took the envelope from his hand, her fingers brushing the smooth paper as if it carried more meaning than it should. "Thank you," she said quietly, though her mind was already racing ahead. The man gave a brief nod and left as quickly as he had arrived, the door closing behind him with a soft chime that echoed longer than usual. Lily stood there for a moment, the envelope resting in her hand, her pulse picking up again, not from fear, but from anticipation. Slowly, she turned it over, her name written in clean, precise lettering that felt unmistakably deliberate. She hesitated, just for a second, before sliding her finger under the seal and opening it. Inside was a single card, thicker than paper, simple but unmistakably intentional. Her eyes moved across the words, reading them once, then again, as the meaning settled in. An invitation, a time, a place, and his name. Lily exhaled slowly, her grip tightening slightly as she looked up from the card, the quiet cafe suddenly feeling too small for the weight of what she held. Because whatever this was, whatever he was asking without saying it directly, it was not just another coincidence. It was a choice. And this time, he was not stepping into her world quietly. He was inviting her into his. The envelope did not leave her hand that night, not even after she locked up the cafe and stepped back into the cool evening air, the city quieter now but still alive in the distance. Lily walked slower than usual, her thoughts circling the same question over and over again. Why her? Not in the abstract way people often wondered about chance, but specifically, deliberately. Why would someone like Noah Carter invite her into his world again, this time with intention instead of coincidence? By the time she reached her apartment, the sky had deepened into a soft navy, the streetlights casting familiar shadows along the sidewalk. She paused at her door, the coat still hanging inside exactly where she had left it days ago, and for a moment, everything felt suspended between two choices: stay where things were predictable, or step into something she did not understand. She exhaled slowly and stepped inside. The next evening arrived faster than she expected. Lily stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the sleeve of a simple dress she rarely wore, her movements careful, almost hesitant. She was not trying to impress anyone. That was not what this felt like. It felt more like preparing for something unknown, something that required a version of herself she was not entirely sure she knew yet. After a moment, her eyes drifted to the coat. It still hung there, quiet and patient, like a reminder of where all of this had started. Without overthinking it, she reached for it and slipped it on. It was still too big, still out of place, but somehow it felt right. The ride across the city felt different this time. Not like she was moving through familiar streets, but like she was crossing into a version of the city she had only ever seen from a distance. When the car stopped, she looked up and felt her breath catch, just slightly. The building in front of her was not just another office or restaurant. It was something else entirely, elegant without trying too hard, the kind of place where every detail was intentional. People moved in and out with quiet confidence, conversations low, the atmosphere controlled but not cold. Lily stepped out slowly, her hand tightening slightly at her side as she approached the entrance. The moment she gave her name, everything shifted again. A host nodded, already expecting her, guiding her through a space that felt both open and carefully structured, like every path had been designed to lead somewhere specific. She became aware of the subtle glances, the quiet recognition that she did not quite belong, and yet, no one questioned her presence. Because she had been invited. That thought grounded her more than anything else. She was not here by accident. She was here because he wanted her to be. The host stopped near a set of large windows overlooking the city, the view stretching endlessly beneath the glow of evening lights. "He will be with you shortly," the host said, stepping away before she could respond. And just like that, she was alone again, standing between two worlds that did not usually meet. Lily let out a slow breath, her eyes moving across the room, taking in the quiet elegance, the calm control, the way everything felt so far removed from the life she knew. And then, without warning, she felt it. Not a sound, not a movement, just a shift in the air, the same subtle awareness she had felt that night. She turned slightly, her heart picking up just enough to remind her that this moment mattered. And there he was. Noah stood a few feet away, no longer framed by darkness or distance, but by light and intention, his presence just as steady, just as controlled, but something in his expression had changed. It was softer now, more aware of her. "You came," he said again, the same words as before, but this time, they carried something different. Not surprise, not expectation, something closer to relief. Lily met his gaze, her posture steady, her voice calm despite the way her pulse had quickened. "You asked me to," she replied. And for the first time since this began, it did not feel like she was being pulled into his world. It felt like she had chosen to step into it herself. For a moment, neither of them moved, the quiet space between them holding everything that had led to this point, every unanswered question, every choice that had brought them here. The city lights stretched endlessly behind him, but Lily found it harder to focus on anything except the way he was looking at her now, not as someone passing through his world, but as someone he had been waiting for. Noah stepped closer, just enough to close the distance without overwhelming it, his presence steady, intentional, the same quiet control she had noticed from the very beginning. "I did not just ask you here to thank you for coming," he said, his voice calm but more open than before. Lily tilted her head slightly, studying him, sensing that whatever he was about to say mattered more than anything that had come before. "Then why did you?" she asked, her tone soft but direct, no hesitation left in it now. Noah glanced briefly toward the skyline, as if grounding himself before answering, then looked back at her, his gaze unwavering. "Because that night was not supposed to end the way it did," he said. "Not just because of what happened, but because of what it showed me." Lily frowned slightly, her curiosity sharpening again. "What do you mean?" she asked. He exhaled slowly, the the smallest break in his otherwise controlled demeanor. I spend most of my life making decisions from a distance, he said. Numbers, strategies, outcomes, everything calculated before it ever becomes real. His eyes held hers, more honest now than she had seen them before. But that night, there was no distance. There was just a moment, and a choice. Lily felt that settle in her chest, the weight of it connecting back to everything he had said before. He had chosen to step in, chosen to stay, chosen to walk away without explanation. And now, he was choosing this. So this is about what? Proving something to yourself? She asked quietly, not accusing, but needing clarity. Noah shook his head once, a faint hint of something softer touching his expression. No, he said. It is about not ignoring something real when it happens. The simplicity of that answer disarmed her more than anything else could have. There was no performance in it, no calculated response, just a truth he was willing to stand in. Lily looked down for a moment, her fingers brushing the sleeve of his coat again. The same coat that had started all of this. The same quiet gesture that had changed everything without asking for anything in return. When she looked back up, her voice was steadier, clearer. And what exactly are you asking me to step into? She said. Noah did not answer right away, but this time, the silence felt different, not uncertain, but deliberate, as if he wanted her to understand before he put it into words. Not my world, he said finally. Something in between. Lily let out a small breath, a faint smile touching her lips, not from amusement, but from recognition. Because that was exactly where she had been standing since the moment they met. Between what she knew and what she did not. Between who she was and who she could become. Between a life that was predictable and one that was not. She glanced out at the city for a second, the lights stretching out like possibilities she had never considered before, then back at him. You realize this does not make any sense, right? She said softly. Noah's expression shifted just